Seats, please. Okay. Everybody stand and join me in the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Citizen comments. Citizen comments. Anybody wishing to speak, you have 5 minutes to speak. State your name and address for the record, please. Citizen comments. Citizen comments. Okay, citizen comments is closed. I want to welcome everybody here this evening. County employees, county department heads, taxpayers, all alike. Appreciate you here tonight. We're going to be going through our budget process tonight. I'd like to keep everything on a civil playing field, not calling out any names or anything derogatory. We want to keep things positive. Let's remember we're doing the Kenosha County work at the local level. We're not at the federal level here. We're at the local level. I also want to welcome our youth in governance, Daniel Curvella, who's here this evening. He's on finance, and our former member, Dustin Beth. How are you this evening? Good to see you. Continuing on. In July, this body adopted an advisory levy resolution not to exceed 2.5%. The county executive introduced a responsible budget within that guideline. All of the oversight committees met. They scrutinized and proposed the budgets from their departments and divisions and passed them on to the Finance Committee. Last Tuesday, the Finance Committee approved the 2015 proposed county budget, and that is what is before us tonight. Again, this is still within the levy guidelines adopted by this board last July. We might not all agree with it 100% with what's in this budget, but as a whole, it looks to serve our community's short and long-range goals in many ways. I just want to say that there are items or issues that are not reflected in this budget. I, as your county board chairman, have an open door and will continue the ongoing discussion on how to make our county government serve our community in the best, most efficient way as possible. I want to thank each and every one of you for your work you've done to review this proposed budget. We are all in this together as public servants, and I expect from all of you here tonight to be polite discourse through our discussions, as I mentioned earlier, on the 2015 proposed budget before you tonight. I also want to thank our administration, particularly Finance Director Dave Gersten and Budget Director Al Schwartz, and the entire finance team for all the work they do to prepare our budget and to answer all the board members' questions openly and honestly. I appreciate their hard work. And is there any supervisor reports this evening?
We accidentally cleared the board. We need to do roll call one more time in order to proceed with all the voting, otherwise our voting will be off. So if we could just do roll call one more time, I'd appreciate it. Well, it's a good way to start the evening, sorry.
Okay.
Technology can be wonderful at times, but there are other times when not so fun. Okay. Thank you. We're good.
It's up to you now, right?
Supervisor reports?
I see no supervisor reports. Any supervisor reports? I see none. Move on, County Clerk.
Policy resolution, second reading to required. Number 2, from Finance Administration Committee regarding 2015 Kenosha County budget. Rose, yes. Ferran Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Brunig, yes. Gantz, yes. Dodge, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and board members, I would move the resolution.
Policy Resolution 2 has been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Rose.
The budget was debated rather thoroughly at the Finance Committee with input from other supervisors who were there in attendance. In June of every year, the board passes a budget resolution, which is a guideline for the county executive and a recommendation to the executive that we would expect a budget within certain levy limits. This budget meets those limits. We assess this budget as a conservative budget, that it was one where there was a 2.4% increase over last year, amounting to an increase in taxes of, at a $100,000 home of $3.90. Adopting a levy of 2.4% over the last year will result in an inflation-adjusted decrease for the average taxpayer of slightly less than 1%. I would also like to focus your attention on the budget resolution, and I think this is an important document. It includes some new things. There are many things within budget resolutions which are repeated year after year. For example, there's $100,000 in the budget for a study of jail and corrections, staffing levels, issues of overtime, salary benefits, recruitment and retention of the workforce. It provides for a sinking fund for Brookside expansion and non-lapsing of future Brookside surpluses beginning in 2015. What that means is that during the construction project, the Brookside institution will not be funded by taxpayer levy. There is additional money and emphasis on the high impact fund in the event that economic development opportunities arise in the future. And you will, at the conclusion of this meeting, also be voting on a capital budget resolution for CABA of some $2 million in the event there is economic development opportunities and we need money immediately to fulfill that responsibility. It does provide for implementation of a general increase for employees and at least the possibility of a new class and compensation program which would be expected to be presented midterm of the year. It provides additionally for the county to purchase from a sole source new election equipment anticipated to be used in the next election. It authorizes the delegation of investment responsibility at the Treasurer's Office to a cooperative effort between the County Treasurer and the Department of Finance and Administration. It gives the Treasurer some assistance with professional recommendations and advice from the finance director and budget director. There are some additional changes made in the county policy and procedures manual. So this is the recommendation for passage this evening, and we endorse it to you. Thank you.
Supervisor Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a statement here before we get started. Supervisor Dodge and myself are overall in favor of the 2015 budget resolution, and we intend to vote for the passage of such a resolution. We are aware that there's perceived conflict of interest on our parts related to those parts of the budget which concerns salary and benefits of current employees, but we are also aware of our responsibility to our constituents to participate in what is likely the most important vote that we take this year. Accordingly, after discussion and consultation with Corporation Counsel, we wish, we wish to abstain from debating or voting on any amendments related to employee salaries and benefits. We would ask the clerk to note that our vote in favor of the budget resolution includes an abstention from voting on this portion of the budget. We appreciate your consideration in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Esposito. I'm going to make a comment now before we proceed on to debate. I am also in favor of the 2015 budget resolution. I intend to vote for passage of it. I'm also advising the board that I'm aware that there could be a perceived conflict of interest on my part related to those parts of the budget which concerns benefits for current employees, but I am likewise aware of my responsibility to my constituents to participate in what is likely the most important vote we take each year. So after consultation with Corporation Counsel, I will abstain from voting on any amendments related to benefits for current employees. I'd ask the clerk to note that my vote in favor of the budget resolutions includes an abstention from voting on that portion of the budget. Thank you. Move on to Supervisor Decker. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to bring up page 7 of the budget resolution. Paragraph 2, I had emailed it to the county clerk, but I did not see it. I had asked it to be sent out to everyone.
I was in my board of canvas all day,
Okay.
so I probably didn't catch
Okay.
yours if it came later in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was.
So I apologize for
Okay,
that.
no problem. I just wanted to let everyone know that I did do that. Paragraph 2, where it talks about the CABA, High Impact Fund. If anyone doesn't have this printed out, I'm going to read it. So, be it further resolved that if additional opportunities arise, the county administration shall appropriate up to an additional $500,000 of funding for the CABA High Impact Fund and bonding if deemed necessary for said additional appropriation, either in 2015 or reimburse itself in 2016, whichever is more practical at the time that the county goes to market in 2015. I have some questions about the High Impact Fund, so I don't know if I should ask that of Mr. Geertsen.
Yeah, he'll come up to the podium.
Thank you. So, through the chair to Mr. Geertsen, so several months ago, we approved giving CABA, I believe it was an additional $500,000. Is that correct?
We authorized the full amount from 2014, and that full amount was dispersed. I think the dollar amount exceeded $500,000. It was the full amount that the board had approved through in the initial resolution for 2014. I can add another bit of information there. Of all of the money that we've dispersed to CABA, there is about $500,000 left, and that is with CABA.
Didn't we approve additional funding that was not in the budget originally?
In 2015, in the 2015 budget, if the board were to favor it, we would approve $2 million in the 2015 budget.
Okay, I'm speaking of this meeting we had several months ago.
Okay, at the meeting from several months ago, we authorized everything. I think it was $1 million. Was it $1 million? No, $2 million. Okay. Okay, so it was an additional 1.5. That full amount was dispersed to CABA. Of that full amount, $500,000 remains. The balance was used for the projects that you're aware of, Kenall and the other projects you're aware of.
Okay, okay. I don't have the red line version of the, of last year's budget resolution. Is this line new? I don't know. Is this line new where we're, giving the administration permission without basically county board oversight of?
No.
This
No.
wording was in the resolution last year?
The wording is similar to last year. You did authorize some additional flexibility for the administration to use that money if an opportunity came up, so we could react immediately without going back to the board. And we did use that. There were a couple things that came up, I think, around Christmas time or the end of the year, so it was very valuable for us. The one thing we did change was the dollar amount to $500,000. So that's, but the basic concept is a carryover from last year.
I thought we approved giving him, CABA, more money than we had planned on recently.
We did.
Because we had a long debate on the county board floor here. I remember, and Supervisor Johnson brought up some good points, and I don't recall what it was. I thought we gave them an additional $500,000 that we had not planned on.
That's correct. The board authorized up to a certain dollar amount. The administration was authorized to release that dollar amount. We brought a resolution back to authorize the full amount. So the amount that we would have had to have come back to the board for, that the board did approve that and allowed the full amount to go to CABA.
I thought we took money that was in like the CIP for the next 5 years and kind of gave it to CABA a couple months ago that we had planned out for the next 5 years, and we basically gave it to them because they had this plan that was right knocking on the door, and they kind of promised the money even though they didn't have it.
So the initial the budget resolution from 2014 authorized $250,000, and then authorized an additional $250,000 if opportunity arose. So there was a total of $500,000 in the 2014 budget. But above and beyond that, we would have to come back for board approval, which we did. So then we got board approval for the balance of that and then released that full amount to CABA. So I think it was $1.5 million was the initial resolution amount.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I make a motion to remove the second paragraph from page 7, please.
There's been a motion to remove the second paragraph from page 7. There's a second by Supervisor Skolitsky. Any more discussion on that, or? Yes.
Could that be read, that which he proposes to remove?
Does he mean reread the paragraph again?
Yeah, please.
Be it further resolved that if additional opportunities arise, the county administration shall appropriate up to an additional $500,000 of funding for the CABA High Impact Fund and bonding if deemed necessary for said additional appropriation, either in 2015 or reimburse itself in 2016, whichever is more practical at the time the county goes to market in 2015. And that's it.
Supervisor Rose?
All right, I'm going to pose this,
We've got other other people in queue right now.
Oh, well,
So
go ahead, you're the
I
chair.
took you out of order. I apologize for that. Vice Chair Bruning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would oppose this removal of this part of the resolution. I believe that CABA has done an excellent job in bringing industry to our community and starting up additional jobs for our people. I think that this is a great way to continue it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bruning. Supervisor Noble?
I have my light on for another.
Okay, sorry about that. Supervisor Rose, you have the floor now. Sorry.
All right, thank you, and I would urge your rejection of this. This is a short-sighted proposition. In today's world, we're highly competitive against other communities, cities, counties, states who are offering big dollars to encourage business to come to their state and city, and you've got to react quickly here. I suppose in an ideal world, cities and states would not be encouraging private business to move to Texas, California, New York, or Wisconsin, but that's the way it is, and it started a long time ago. If we're not going to play in the game with substantial funds, and there are states that are offering a lot more than we offer in Wisconsin, and cities that are offering in counties much greater sums than we are, we're not even going to be competitive. Look at the television. You'll see ads recently. New York, come to New York, and they're promoting the tax benefits and implying that if you move there, you're going to receive other kinds of benefits. So this is an administrative function. Every time an opportunity comes along, are we going to convene the county board and then be debating back and forth and debating back and forth? And in the meantime, the word gets out around the country and somebody else is going to beat us to the punch. Therefore, we have a proposition this evening for bonding at $2 million. There's this money in the proposed in the resolution so that we can take advantage of those without convening the county board, debating it back and forth. In the meantime, missing the opportunity and the community is shortchanged. I urge your rejection of this tonight.
Thank you, Supervisor Rolls. Supervisor Skalitsky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I seconded this motion because the striking of this paragraph has nothing to do with the speed at which we can respond to opportunities that present ourselves. Businesses do not move in a month. It is a long process. Part of that process requires oversight by the county board for spending commitments that the county is entering into. Nobody's denying the effectiveness of the high impact fund, and that striking this does not say that. What it requires is oversight remains with the county board for large sums of money that'll be committed and obligated to the taxpayer. CABA's done a fine job of attracting, and yes, it is competitive out there. I don't think we should undercut the attractiveness of the state of Wisconsin, its employees, the educational system and whatnot, and that's what employers look at. Yes, this is one of those pieces that helps maybe put the full puzzle together. But just giving discretionary authority to the administration is essentially removing the county board's responsibility. Our responsibility is for oversight, and let us not forget that. It does not mean that the administration would act improper or imprudent. It means that there's a chain of command for review and analysis. And so I urge fellow supervisors to support the removal of this paragraph because it's important for us to remain a board that is responsible for oversight. And that is the key thing that this paragraph removes from the floor of this board. I am going to support the removal of it, and I urge my fellow supervisors to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Go on to Supervisor Grady, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have both a couple of questions through the chair to Mr. Geertsen and a comment or two. Mr. Geertsen, if this were to be removed, this second paragraph, would it have the potential to hamper, inhibit, get in the way of CABA's efforts as we have known them today?
Yes. I could speak more to that if you like.
I would like you to speak more to that, but let me ask another question before we get too far along. And the second question is it not the case, or I'll rephrase it, has it been the case in the past that for each time CABA has needed regular funding or additional funding, it has come through the county board committee and county board structure? Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and comment if you'd like to, David.
Having the discretion was very valuable. There were two businesses that CABA was working with, and it was during the holiday time. CABA was able to confidently contact the county and interact directly with the county executive and confirm that the dollars could be released and that CABA could commit those dollars to the two businesses, and we would not have had time to come back to the board, and waiting would have been detrimental to the deal. That did happen last year. So.
Is there further comment, or is that it?
That completes my comment.
Thank you for the comments. So you basically heard the answers to the questions, and the questions were, would this hamstring or get in the way, perhaps potentially, of CABA's mission? The answer was yes. The second question that was asked was, has it been the past procedure of the request for funding to go through the committee structure and Kenosha County Board? The answer is yes. So when you take a look at that and you look at Kenosha as being now a hot spot, not just in Wisconsin and the Midwest, but in the nation as well, we are worked very hard to get to this position. So I can understand Supervisor Decker's motion, I can understand Skolitsky's second, but when you take a look at this, really, this is not something we want to tinker with. We're on the road to success, we're on the path to success. To get in the middle of something where we still have full discretion, full oversight, I think is short-sighted, and I would certainly not support this. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Alverman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to support this amendment this evening either. I've served with 3 administrations here and with CABA for many, many, many years, all the way back to when I was on the Twin Lakes Village Board. Of the administrations I've worked with, this is by far the most conservative and thoughtful as far as not jumping at things. Things are well thought out. There's a plan, and there has been a plan here since this administration took over here in Kenosha County, and CABA has had a plan for many years, and it is very successful. So I don't have any fears of them doing something that is going to harm the taxpayers of Kenosha County, and I don't have any fear of them not representing the taxpayers, so I won't support this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor Alverman. Supervisor Ritzloff, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to support this amendment. I hear all the discussion about it, and since I've been exposed to this, I have to admit the taxpayers haven't been totally protected in this. When I was exposed to this TIF district issue, I know a past supervisor, Clark, came in here and exposed that, and I pursued that with some people and talked to the county executive on this, and it's serious. We're handing out a lot of money to these, which is a good thing, but no one seems to be thinking about the taxpayers, especially the city of Kenosha. By not closing these TIF districts, we're out all this tax money.
We're talking about,
I'm talking about yes.
right now we're talking about CABA.
Yes.
And we're talking about the amendment that's
I'm talking about supporting the amendment.
I'm going to call you out of order. Keep it on what we're talking about. I want to keep this meeting tonight focused at the issue at hand.
The issue at
Please
hand.
do that.
I am.
I'll hammer the gavel again. I'm not afraid to do it. Talking about the amendment that's being proposed. That's what we're talking about.
And that's what I was talking about.
Nothing to do with that. Nothing.
I'm talking about it was just mentioned, a supervisor said that the taxpayers are represented in the CABA discussion, okay?
There
That
you
was
go.
mentioned, and I said, I'm not so sure about that. You heard my discussion, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Ritzloff. Any other discussion on this? Roll call, okay. Vote yes if you're in favor of the amendment striking that particular paragraph, and no if you're against that particular striking. Go back to the new discussion. Vice Chair Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 298 in your budget book, I am making a motion to reduce the expenditure for computer hardware and software, object code 581700, by $300,000. This will take it from $2,036,145 to $1,736,145. And then also in the budget language for the 2015 budget resolution, it would read as follows. This is an addition to it. Be it further resolved that the Information Technology Division be allowed to transfer funds between projects listed on page 301 as long as it does not exceed the total appropriated for hardware and software.
Okay, it's been moved by Vice Chair Bruning, seconded by Supervisor Decker. Discussion?
I have more.
Oh, you have more?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to get a second first. I have had conversations with both the county executive and through him with the IT department. I've also talked to a couple different supervisors. I believe it's appropriate to reduce this allocation as it'll give them more flexibility within their department to move the numbers around as they are doing the projects, as they don't know what the true costs are at this time. So by reducing it to $300,000 and giving them the flexibility, it's the same thing as we do through the Public Works at this time, and I think that will help reduce the CIP a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bruning. Supervisor Noble?
Again, I want to speak on another, how do I stay in the queue for the next item? 'Cause I got erased out, and I want to just,
You gotta be fast with your
cancel me off.
fingers, I guess. I don't know. The best I can tell you for this evening, but keep trying, we'll get to you, I promise. Supervisor Kohlmeyer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this amendment. I think it's a very prudent, reasonable reduction for the capital and IT. We had discussed this at the Finance and Administration Committee during the budget hearings, and I think we have plenty of funds still available to accomplish the goals of the administration, very similar to what we did last year, and I urge your approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Rolls, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. I urge you to oppose this. The administration presented the budget item as $2 million. Now, I direct your attention to the appendix. And take a look at page 2 in the appendix, because I think that tells you the story. In 2014, we cut $300,000 from that software budget. So it was $2 million, and that's the presentation this evening. If you want to cut another $300,000 from that budget, you're now really cutting some $600,000 from the budget, and I don't know why. Give me the rationale other than we want to save some bonded money here, and why not $400,000 or why not $200,000? I mean, present to me the data which says you can do it for $1,700,000, not $2,036,000 here. This is sort of technical stuff. It's not within our common knowledge how much this software is going to cost. I have to give some credence to the IT director who comes in and says, well, we, in our professional opinion, view this as the right amount, giving credit to the fact that last year we cut some $300,000 from this item. And so why didn't we last year just hack off $600,000? Well, we discussed it at that time. We reviewed it, we decided it. Now it's another $300,000 because that's, I guess, the figure that we cut every year from this. You have to give us reasons based upon some cost. In other words, I'll back it if you show me a price tag of $1,700,000. But short of you coming in here with a price tag, a catalog, some advice from some professional software manufacturer that says, yes, $1,700,000 is more than enough, or as Supervisor Kohlmeyer says, if that's not enough, we've got plenty of money elsewhere. Show me where there's plenty of money elsewhere, because maybe that plenty of money elsewhere ought to be translated into a direct reduction in the levy. But nobody brought to the Finance Committee. No Finance Committee member said, well, there's plenty of money elsewhere to do something else like levy reduction. The proposal here isn't levy reduction at all in 2015. So I would urge you to give some credence here to the proposition that was made by the IT director, who spent his adult life in this business, that the figure of a little over $2 million is indeed the right figure, and let's move on.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Skalitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may be mistaken, but I believe when I reviewed the CIP, I thought I saw it was $2 million every year for the IT budget. And I was thinking, that just seems like a convenient number. $2 million each year. I just can't believe it costs $2 million each year. But I'm not an IT expert. I am supervisor who's responsible for watching over the taxpayer, and just increasing things every year because it seems like the right number doesn't feel right to me either. And I do agree with Supervisor Rose's. Maybe it should be $500,000, but that's not the motion that's in front of us. It was a reasonable reduction in the CIP. Considering the fact there wasn't any others, I'm going to support this motion, and I commend the Supervisor Brunig for bringing it to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Supervisor Gable. Yep.
Thank you. I worked at the phone company for years. I watched the neglect that happens if you don't keep up with software and hardware. When you fall behind in these things, catching up becomes a real issue and a whole lot more expensive. Software is a tool that makes the employees more efficient. Hardware is the backbone of the whole IT network. Like I say, from my experience at the phone company, after years of neglect, when we finally had a company that decided they were going to invest, there were problems every place we went because the hardware and the software were no longer supported anywhere. So I support continued growth in the IT department.
Thank you, Supervisor Gable. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
I have a question to Chairman Bruning, or Vice Chairman Bruning, if she can answer it. Last year, the proposed budget, how much did we cut from the IT budget?
I do not know.
Okay. Did Supervisor Rose, did you just say we cut $300,000 last year from their budget, or their proposed budget?
You have the floor.
Yes, and take a look at
Okay.
page
Okay.
2 of the appendix.
Okay. So we cut $300,000 from the proposed budget. Is there a budget shortfall this year for the IT department? Supervisor Rose?
There will be some carryover items. Is that what you ask? Is there a shortfall? No.
So you're saying we cut $300,000 from the proposed budget, but we don't have a shortfall? We actually have carryover?
No, some of the projects have not been completed. We don't have a surplus, that's, I think, what you're asking, and the answer is no.
But we don't have a shortfall.
No.
So we cut $300,000 last year, but we managed and don't have a shortfall this year. I think we could probably cut $300,000 this year and probably not have a shortfall this year also. I'll support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. All right, is there anybody else wishing to speak on this item that hasn't spoken yet? Anybody else? Okay.
I would like to ask the IT director to respond to the proposition here. You know, if somebody is appropriated X number of dollars, they spend X number of dollars. So.
He's going to come to the
All right.
podium and address them.
I'd so yield.
Thank you. As far as the 2014 IT budget goes and the question regarding our shortfall or anything else, the carryover funds and the money that hasn't been spent, it's not a matter of it won't be spent. It's a matter of some projects span more than 1 year, and we fund them entirely at once. So as it relates to the current budget, that's what is going on right now. And then in relation to the 2015 budget, the one thing that we did discuss at the Finance Committee was that we did already cut nearly $1 million of projects out of the budget. And what we brought forward to the board were all the projects that did pass the muster. So are there any other questions?
Does that answer your question that you may have towards that?
My question was answered.
Very good. Just checking.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sean.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on.
I don't know if my light turned on.
You're on. We have one more supervisor. Supervisor Johnson, you have the floor.
I do want to ask about the $2 million figure because it is a very odd figure to budget. It's very rounded. So how did you arrive at the $2 million?
Well, the $2 million isn't this year, actually. The $2 million in the CIP is an estimate of approximately what will be spent in future years, which we can't always be exactly sure of. So we put in an estimate that's rounded off. This year, the number was actually, I believe it was $2,036,145. And that's just where the projects ultimately ended up arriving at. Originally, the budget was approximately $3 million through our IT steering committee. That number was further reduced as projects were removed, and this was just the final number that we arrived at.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. All right. Supervisor Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is a conversation that I had with the county executive earlier this week on whether or not $300,000 could be cut from the CIP for the IT department. He assured me that as the project started and as they moved along, he felt that through his conversations with the director of IT that this could happen and that it would not cause any hardship in the department. So again, I urge you to support this. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other lights. Hold on. Supervisor Ron Frederick, you have the floor.
It's interesting that Supervisor Buning had a conversation with the county executive, and he said the $300,000 wouldn't be affected, and I had a conversation with the county executive, and he had no problem me voting against cutting the $300,000 out. So I don't know what's going on here, but thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ron Frederick. Okay, we'll have a roll call, but to be clear, we're going to be, the amendment is to take out $300,000. Supervisor Colmeyer.
Can I just make two other points on the numbers really quick? If you looked at, you go to the appendix, page 2, there's a summary of projects over 30,000. If you add that page up, it's 1,579,000. So that means we have another 400,000 plus of projects that are under 30,000. That's, I mean, if we cut to 1.7, we can still fund every major project we've got, plus have another 100,000 for all the small projects. Second thing, if you look at the capital, the bonding that we have the next years out, the levy for the interest on the debt that we're paying is going up like 600,000 this year. If you look to next year's budget, 2016, we're going up over $1 million for interest. Our budget levy that we're going to be looking at in the future is going up incrementally every year to cover the interest. So I know we want to do things for employees, which is great, but so I think we just have to take a harder look at some capital to try to keep that number down so the interest doesn't continue to grow. So I think this is a reasonable, I know it's what the administration initially proposed and they cut back, but I still think we have a lot of projects here that we're funding, and we have, in my opinion, enough room to cut back just a little bit on that number. We're talking about 15% of what they're asking for, so thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Poole, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at the Finance Committee where this was discussed, and I supported what Supervisor Kohlmeyer was trying to do there, and I think the IT department might be biting off more than they can do in 1 year, so I'd like to say that I support Vice Chair Brunig's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Poole. Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, there'll be a roll call as requested. The amendment is to take $300,000 out of the IT budget.
And to allow the IT department to move their funds as needed.
Does everyone understand it and clear about that? Go ahead.
The motion is to remove $300,000 from the IT CIP and then to allow them to move the funds within their department as needed.
So everyone's clear on that now? You understand it? So vote yes if you're in favor of that particular amendment, or vote no if you're against it. On to another discussion, and look who's got the floor. Supervisor Noble.
I took your advice. I went quick. I'm going to make a motion, and I lost it.
Hang on, we'll wait.
Where'd it go?
Supervisor Noble.
Yeah, I don't know, I gave you the motion, now I have so many copies of it and I can't find it right now. Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. I'd like to amend the Kenosha County Policy and Procedures Manual to add the following language at Section 9 of the Hiring and Promotional Procedures and Policies, entitled Consolidation of Years of Service. The final sentence of that section reads, "The bridge in service applies only to county length of service for the purposes of benefits." I would like to add, nothing in this section shall be construed or interpreted to allow for the granting of post-retirement health benefits pursuant to Section 13 of the Benefits Policy section of the Policy and Procedures Manual. I recognize that this change may require changes in other policies, including the Kenosha County Other Post-Employment Benefits Policy, Health Insurance, and ask that the administration be directed to make any and all amendments, revisions, or rescissions of existing policies to be consistent with this change. If I get a second, I'll explain.
Okay, it was moved by Supervisor Noble, seconded by Supervisor Skalitsky. Any discussion on, are you done?
No,
with your
I'm going to
thing?
explain
Okay.
now.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I'm going to refer, if they want to put it on the screen, I'm referring to section, page 17.
17 of what?
and it was in your packet. If you look at the supervisor's questions and go one up.
Wait a second, sorry.
There it is. The last paragraph right there is what I'm referring to. And what I read is I'm going to add on something that basically says that this paragraph is not to be used for post-retirement health insurance benefits, which is 23 pages away, which I'll get to. The interpretation of this paragraph came to my attention last Tuesday afternoon on October 21st when I was attempting to do the due diligence of a county supervisor relative to the confirmation of Ray Arbit. On Tuesday, October 21st, I wanted to find out if any deals had been cut for Ray Arbit, especially relating to post-employment health insurance. When I asked Bob Riedel on the phone on Tuesday afternoon, Bob said no deals were cut other than giving him 25 days of vacation. But he could, and I emphasize the word could, become eligible for post-employment health insurance by following the language adopted on January 1st, 2014 on page 17, right there. Okay. I was at a loss for words and asked Bob to bring the page 17 document to the meeting so I could review. Why was I at a loss for words? Well, because the county executive took the lead in 2012 to end the OPEB liability for non-protected employees. And I have been following the language ever since we took that tough position. Bob showed me the paragraph on page 17 just minutes before the meeting started, and after reading the paragraph, I immediately said that this language could be used for computing vacation and other similar benefits, but not for extending the costly benefit of post-retirement health insurance. He said he would argue that point. In my mind, this is two entirely different policies. He further said that would have been a topic for discussion during last year's budget when we adopted that effective January 1st, 2014. Bob also told me he was already had other employees request a bridge in service. So this issue is beyond Ray Arbit and may impact other employees that may have approached the Director of Personnel Services. Keep in mind, every time the personnel director exercises this option, he opens the window of OPEB liability in the amount of excess of $100,000 to your constituents, the tax-paying public. My position is the Director of Public Services is interpreting this consolidation of years of service language on page 17 beyond the intent as adopted on January 1, 2014, and this is the essence of my motion, which was prepared by Corporation Counsel at my request. I talked to a couple members of the Finance Committee from last year, and they do not recall an explanation that this language would be used for extending post-employment health insurance. So, because Bob Riedel said that page 17 is the language that the county board passed last year that enables Ray Arbit and apparently others to eventually qualify, I took the time to listen to the tape from last year's Finance Committee budget meeting. And just as an aside, has anybody ever done that? That is not, Anyways, I urge you to do the same. But this is a synopsis of what was said relative to the consolidation of years of service. Bob gave some examples of getting employees back at a higher pay than entry level, and then went on to say that the administration needs to be more nimble getting employees with experience. Also said the only change is from 10 years to 5 years. If you look up there, you'll see it says 5 years. So the only change to that paragraph was it said 10 years before. Currently, he said he can invite an employee back with 10 years experience. Then after 24 years, he can glue the 10 years to the 2 years, which is the 24 months. With the amendment, he can glue the 5 years to the 2, and then they can have the associated benefits. That was the only moment he said anything about associated benefits. That's a vague reference to associated benefits. no mention of post-retirement benefits. He also made it clear that it could be used to invite employees back. No mention of giving the benefit to employees that would have already come back to work. Strictly was told the committee he was going to use it in an effort to get employees back. But an hour later, so there's another hour of listening to the tape, about an hour later, there was a brief discussion of post-retirement benefits, page 40. Go to page 40, please. You've also got it in your packet. It should be a matter of just scrolling.
I know, hang on a minute. Not used to a laptop.
Well, I'll keep going. Okay, right there, right at the top. That's where it actually talks. This is 23 pages later, an hour later on the tape. Post-retirement health benefits. About an hour later, there was a brief discussion of post-retirement benefit, page 40. Bob said it was strictly a procedural change and was just making the policy available via link consistent with all the policies. You can see where it says it's got a HTTP www where you can link it to the policy. The question was asked if there was a change to the policy, and Bob said no, just making it available by link. No mention that the change on page 17, that was the 10 years to the 5 years, would be used in the post-employment health insurance benefit, now available by link. And to me, that was a proper time. It should have been mentioned if that was the intention. Take a look at the now let's take a look at the post-employment benefit policy, health insurance on page 3 and 6. When she goes there, you'll see that the language there has also been changed from 10, apparently, if it was there before, was changed from 10 to 5. If you want to go to page 3 and 6, or look at your packets on your desk, it's in there. If you look at my questions, it's attached to it. Here I'm. Earlier, I mentioned that the county, basically, it's on there. When she finds it, you'll see that that language is now in the post-retirement policy, including changing from 10 to 5. Earlier, I mentioned that the county exec took a position in 2012 to shut the door on OPEB liability. Employees hired before, if you can get to that. If you can't get to that, then look in your packet. You do have it. Everybody has it. It's attached to questions by county board supervisors behind my question. Okay, I'm going to continue because hopefully she can catch up. Employees hired before January 1, I'd like you to see the language for yourself, 2012, must have 10 years of continuous employment. Not sure why the effective date language is added apparently in 2013, but the word is still there. The key word is continuous. It also says on page 40, which we were looking at before, most employers hired on or before January 1, 2013 are eligible, which is consistent with the policy itself. Mr. Gersten and I had a long discussion on this topic last night after you all went home, and he believes that the consolidation language was in the original post-retirement policy, albeit 10 years and not 5. If this is the case, then the paragraph on page 4 makes perfect sense. And that paragraph, we're not there yet, but that paragraph closes the back door on OPEB liability by stating employees hired after January 1, 2012 are not eligible for post-employment health insurance benefits. In other words, in my opinion, if your last hire date is after January 1, 2012, the door is closed for consolidation of years of service. They can no longer glue years together. In fact, Mr. Gersten believes It is rarely used and cited a situation to attract an employee back 20, 25 years ago that we talked about. And he said he was going to find out if it had been used for anyone other than Ray Arbit and the person from 25 years ago, basically reiterating Bob's comments that it would be used as an enticement to invite someone back. Frankly, in my opinion, the front door is closed, the back door is closed. However, my opinion doesn't matter, so I've asked Corporation Counsel for opinion regarding the interpretation of this language. And his opinion may undo any previous decisions made by the Personnel Director for employees who he deemed qualified in previous years. My motion is prospective in nature. It is not retroactive. It is an attempt to close the doors and the windows and moving forward. I believe it's a discussion that we should have had last year. We didn't have it, and the county board sets policy. I think it's time to totally shut the door and vote for this amendment and put an end to OPEB liability.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Arrington, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's a lot of information to take in. To Supervisor Noble, could you read your amendment again so I can clearly understand where you're going?
Yes. It is a lot to take in, and basically all I'm really doing is saying that section, page 17 wording, nothing in that section shall be construed or interpreted to allow for the granting of post-retirement health benefits pursuant to section X111, which is on page 40, of the benefits policy section and the policies and procedures manual. It was, without repeating pretty much everything else said to support my amendment, that's what the amendment is.
May I ask a question of the Corporation Counsel?
Sure you may.
Question for Corporation, is this something that because I'll be honest with you, I am not privy to clearly understanding what we're trying to amend here. Could you please further instruct me on the language and where we're proceeding with changing the language as it pertains in the handbook?
Certainly. The request that was made by Supervisor Noble was to clarify the existing policy. If there was a question as to whether or not the existing policy, which allows for that consolidation of years of service, would allow the Personnel Director to grant post-retirement health benefits to someone who returns to county service under the terms that allow for that consolidation of years of service. He asked for language that would clarify that nothing else, that while other benefits could be granted under that consolidation of service, so for example, seniority, vacation, et cetera.
Okay.
He wanted language that would make it clear that would not allow the granting of post-retirement health care benefits.
Okay, so at the end of the day, it's about the post-retirement health care benefit?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Skalitsky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And through the chair, I would have a question for the Personnel Director.
Sure. Mr. Riedel?
Thank you, Director. From the time that this new wording was put in place, effective January 1st, 2014, could you let the supervisors know how many individuals have been granted the post-employment health care benefits?
This year?
No, since I guess, January 1st.
The aforementioned Mr. Arbit is the only one.
Okay. Thank you very much. At $100,000 for each case, first I want to commend Supervisor Noble for doing his research and really digging deep into this. There was a lot of work involved. I can imagine listening to the tapes. It's mind-numbing, but clearly there was some additional discretion that was available, and I will support his motion, and that's why I seconded it at $100,000 per act. I don't think that the taxpayers can afford that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
Question to Supervisor Noble through the chair, if he can answer it. Is this your amendment basically to clear up ambiguity in the wording?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, so what you're thinking is when we passed the OPEB changes, or removing them, and then also passed the wording that was dated effective January 14th, that your understanding is we were not going to give OPEB benefits to anyone that we rehired. And you want to clarify and clear up the language so that is definitely stated in the language, correct?
Correct. As I said, in my opinion, anyone hired, because there's a clear paragraph there that says it, anybody hired after January 1, 2012 is not eligible for post-retirement health insurance benefits. But for some reason, you just heard Bob say that Ray Arbit would be deemed possible, he could qualify or whatever he just said. But yet he's going to be hired after January 1, 2012. So I don't know how they're interpreting this language. It's clearly different than I'm interpreting it. So, and I'm asking for a legal opinion from Corporation Counsel, but in and above that, I'm just asking, let's just say they can't use it anymore and let him decide whether or not Ray Albert is eligible to get it, and anybody else that may or may not have been given it. So we're not really making a decision for Ray Arbit. We're making a decision to stop it for the future.
And
I would think the Corporation Counsel may agree with me on
that. I'm sorry, is the question that
I say your decision would be our decision is not, like I said before, is basically for the future. Your decision is going to be whether or not this applies to Ray Arbit.
I believe any change in the policy the board would make would be prospective in nature. That's correct.
For the future.
Yes.
What was Corporation Counsel's decision on the wording now? Is Corporation Counsel saying that the door is open to offering it to people as of this moment where we have not passed the change? The door is open to offer OPEB benefits?
I've not expressed a formal opinion, and part of the question that was put to me by Supervisor Noble would be in regards to such an opinion and whether or not our office would be properly considering it, or whether we should look at outside counsel to perhaps provide an opinion on that question. I can tell you that I do not believe that there's, I believe the way it has been interpreted so far is consistent with the drafted language.
With what, I'm sorry?
With the language as drafted.
Interpreted by who?
Well, I'm sorry, interpreted may be the wrong word. I don't believe, it's not my job to provide you my opinion other than a legal opinion.
Right.
I can give you my personal opinion, but I don't think that's my position.
So Corporation Counsel has not come...
We have not provided a legal opinion on this question. That's
Okay,
correct.
so you haven't been asked, or maybe you have, but you haven't been able to render a legal opinion yet?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. So it hasn't been okay, all right. Well, I, like Supervisor Skalitsky said, would like to thank Supervisor Noble for his diligence on this issue, because I know when we voted for eliminating the OPEB benefits, that was the date. We are done. Anyone hired from before then, that's fine that they have them, great, but moving forward, anyone else, they weren't getting them. That was just the way it was, and to basically grandfather someone in, that was not our intention. If you wanted your OPEB benefits, you should have stayed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Kohlmeyer, you have the floor.
I think my question was answered just about this being prospective instead of retroactive, so that was all I had.
Okay. Supervisor Gens, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a lot to swallow and a lot of moving parts. Would we need 2/3 to change this language this evening? Through the chair to the Corporation Counsel.
The motion as made is to amend the Policies and Procedures Manual that you are considering as part of the budget resolution.
And budget resolution needs 2/3.
Budget resolution requires only a simple majority.
Okay, so simple majority. I guess, speaking from my heart here, I think maybe we ought to, what would be the problem with postponing this so we can have it further analyzed? I mean, we don't even have the recommendations back from Corporation Counsel. I understand what Supervisor Noble is trying to do, but I couldn't follow the program here with going from one packet to another, and I just think that I would like some time to analyze this situation. So I guess I would want to know what the ruling is from the Corporation Counsel before I make a decision. So I'll listen. I'll be quiet now and listen. But this is a very confusing issue to bring up now, with all the different pages and an outstanding, Corporation Counsel question. I'm just not comfortable with it. Thank you.
I don't think you can, because we gotta get it.
Is that it, Supervisor?
Unless you want to refer the whole budget then.
Vice Chair Bruning, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As this is a policy change, I would like to move to refer this back to the Finance Administration Committee.
Okay, it's been moved to refer it back to Finance and Administration Committee by Supervisor Bruning, seconded by Supervisor Arrington. Hold on just one second.
Sure.
Done the discussion on that now,
Debatable, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to debate that fact now about sending it back to committee then. We're going to switch over to that. I'm going to clear the board out, and after I clear the board, then we'll go to discussion on sending it back to committee. Supervisor Arrington, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support sending it back to committee. As most of you supervisors, you all know how I like to do things. I believe that if we're going to make a decision, that the very first thing that should happen is that the people that are in charge of the committee that's going to oversee and do all these different things on behalf of us as a whole, take a look at the information. The first time I pressed my light tonight concerning this issue, I was very confused. I'm still very confused about what this issue truly entails and impacts, and I didn't feel comfortable about it myself. And so I supported going back to committee. We need to get in the habit of hashing things out at the committee level and making decisions down there and then bringing it before the board. I don't know if anyone else in the room is confused. I was going to vote against it, not because I don't believe it's not a good idea. It's just that we don't have all the information that I felt is necessary to make a decision about this particular issue. So let's send it back to committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Noble on sending it back to committee.
Well, it's pretty unusual that all of a sudden we want to send something back to the committee, but I don't know. I guess my thought is we wanted to wrap this up and get it in as part of the budget. That's how it was done last year. It's, I guess the Corporation Counsel, I mean, can we still get this done and get it effected by January 1st? And if Ray Arbit is the only one in 2014, maybe it'd be proper that Ray Arbit would know where he stands before he actually starts work.
If the question is one of timing, can it be done before the end of the year? That's not a question that I think that I can answer. I think the question of whether or not the policy and procedure manual, I think, can be amended at any time by this body. It's traditionally or typically done as part of the budget process so that the changes are made at one point. But the policy and procedure manual can be changed at any time.
I guess the other thing of it is, I think you should get it up, come to grips with it. I mean, it's not that difficult. We're just saying, we're not going to use this language anymore. The OPEB liabilities, we're supposed to, we slammed the door on it, it's done. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees. We have 1,000 employees. If we've granted this to 1 or 2, maybe last year, or 3 last year, so let's say 5 employees have been granted this super benefit. That's 5 employees is a half, 1% of all the employees that work here. So if you're a kind of an employee guy, well, then you should be supporting this amendment. And if you're a taxpayer guy, you should be supporting it as well. I mean, to me, this is a morale-busting thing. You got people that have worked here since January of 2003, have been loyal and stayed in employment. They do not qualify for this benefit. But if you come and go, we'll add them all up, glue them together, and we'll put you in here. We'll give you that benefit. To me, that's morale busting. So you can, normally I wanted to take the confirmation process to committee, which is our process. But we didn't do it that night, and tonight, I really don't think we should do it. I think it's pretty clear. I spent a lot of time researching it. You're not going to find out any more than what you know right now, unless you want to listen to the tapes yourself. I don't know what you're going to find out by sending it back to committee. I want you to stick up for 99.5% of the employees that work here. That's what that's how you should be thinking of it.
Is that it?
Yes.
Supervisor Grady, you have the floor.
My question's been answered. I'll defer comment. Thank you.
Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
I would like to know whether or not this benefit was offered to Mr. Arbit to urge him to take the position, and whether or not, if we pass this evening, does he receive it or not?
I'm going to ask.
And if nobody knows the answer to that question, I think it needs to be answered in the matter.
Could you approach the podium there? For me? Yes, sir. Did you answer that question for him or not?
Does Mr. Arbit know that that is available to him? Yes.
No, was it offered to him as an enticement for the job so that he would have some sort of argument that this is part of his contract, this post-employment benefit, in spite of what I anticipate we will do this evening and adopt the proposition of Supervisor Noble?
Yes.
He was offered.
He knows that if he fulfills the requirements of the policies that govern post-retirement, and they are in effect in our interpretation presently, that he will be eligible after 15 years of service once he has reached the age of 60.
Well, I would like to know whether or not, it would seem to me that if we pass this evening, and he has not, he doesn't commence work, I don't think that he would be eligible for it if we pass it tonight. I think we should know that up front, and he should know that up front as well. The employment of him did not go to committee. Rules were suspended. I was one that said it should go to committee because you want to know what the full employment package is. Apparently, this was part of it. We were not informed of that. It's now been brought to our attention that that was part of the proposal, that if employed, this is something he would be eligible for. That's never been voted on by the board, and probably the board would be, as I'm listening to the discussion, surprised that that was part of it. So before I vote on this evening, I want to know one way or the other, and I think he needs to know one way or the other. If we pass this, it would seem to me that he's disqualified from it. And, but I want to know that up front. And I think our position ought to be that if whoever it is, we've passed this policy. It's a policy, I believe, that Supervisor Noble thinks clarifies what was clear in the past. I don't think it was ambivalent in the past, but at any rate, that's debatable. And we need to know on that. So I'm going to support the referral just to have that point clarified. And we could have done that before we jumped and passed, without referring to committee, Mr. Arbut's nomination.
Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Sklitsky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Rose brings up some good points. I think that this is a very simple motion. The policy was passed. It was not apparently concrete enough, or it allowed some wiggle room of interpretation that this benefit was not going to be offered moving forward from January 1st, 2014. But apparently, it's open to interpretation now. That's why this motion and amendment was made. Because apparently, although we thought we had something concrete in place, indeed it was not. I don't think that it needs to go back to committee for discussion to understand what it is. It means no post-employment benefits. That's it. It's not a tough one. Now, with regards to the individual that's been part of the discussion, that's a separate discussion altogether. And he may choose or decline to move forward with his future employment with the county, and that's up to his discretion. This is strictly clarifying, and I would hope once and for all, putting to rest any future interpretations of what this rule, which was put in place by this or a board that sits in this room, to eliminate this benefit. I supported and will continue to support the motion to have this policy changed, and I think it's very simple. The committee isn't going to be investigating anymore, analyzing anymore. The wording is very clear. And that is, and as Supervisor Noble says, we thought we closed the doors, must have left the window open. Now the windows are closed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Sklitsky. Supervisor Alverman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most of us thought that that door was closed, so it's a little bit of a surprise, and thank Supervisor Noble for listening to those tapes. I have a hard time even wanting to remember that meeting. But I do not think that we should, I think the committee should discuss this at their next meeting or whenever they have a chance, but I don't think we should send it there this evening. I think we should vote in favor of this amendment this evening and have peace of mind here until we get what happened figured out. I don't think we're going to be able to change anything that happened here in the last month or so, if there was that wiggle room, but we need to be sure that it has to, if there's offers made and things done, that we're made aware of the offers at least. So I think that we should vote positively on Supervisor Noble's amendment tonight.
Thank you, Supervisor Alverman. Supervisor Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the one thing that I will, because I've tried not to say anything about this particular discussion that we're having here on the floor. The first thing is that I think it's clear, we talked about this in the last meeting. You know, whether you work for Kenosha County or any other entity, you can leave that job, and this man in particular has returned to us to work a job. I felt that there were some supervisors who had a problem with that man returning here to that position. And so here we are here in a budget finalization, talking about something that Corporation Counsel has told us we can change at any time. Unfortunately, we have used this man's name as the example, as the catapult that we're going to use to shut the doors and shut the windows. I don't like it. I don't like it because it seems as if we're singling him out, whether we say we are or we're not. And it doesn't make us look good as a whole to continue to talk about this and using his name in reference if we're not specifically speaking to his position. The problem here is the job. He took the job back. He left the county and then he came back. Now, we've talked about sending it back to committee. Whether it goes back to committee or not, we're still going to need to get more information on it, and it should go back to committee so that we can take the right steps. I agree with you, Supervisor Rose. If we shouldn't have suspended the rules. I couldn't foresee, I agreed in suspending the rules. I couldn't foresee that it was going to be this big of a deal with this particular individual taking this job. But first and foremost, I want to give him the respect that he deserves as one of our employees. He took the position. Okay, whether or not he leaves again will be his decision. I just don't believe that we need to continue to talk about this and refer to him in that manner. Let's send this back to committee. It does not impact us tonight. If it can go back to committee and we can change it in the handbook later, let's do that. And let's stop mentioning his name in this meeting. It doesn't look good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Rose.
I don't know what his employment contract reads, and none of us do. It never went back to committee, but I do know that at that meeting of the county board, when the rules were suspended and the nomination voted on, I asked about that. What was his employment contract? And we were told what the salary was, and that was it. So if you don't send it back to committee this evening for review, which I think is a more sensible thing to do, and to review it in December, because this is the only person, it is a resolution aimed at him. It only applies to him. So it ought to go back to committee. But if it doesn't go back to committee, I think it should be clearly set on the record that the legislative intent here is that he doesn't get that post-employment benefit, period.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Noble.
My only comment is to repeat what I said and what Corporation Counsel confirmed, that my motion is prospective in nature, it's not retroactive. So my motion stops it moving forward. The Corporation Counsel at some point will come to a decision, or outside counsel, if he hires outside counsel, will come to a decision with regards to the current person who's in flux, let's say, without mentioning a name, and any other people that may have been granted that in the past. So, once again, it's prospective in nature, it's not retroactive, it's not punitive or anything like that. It's just to close the door, close the window, close the front door, back door, and the window. I think we can do what Supervisor Elverman said, vote it up tonight and send it to committee for discussion if they want to with Corporation Counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Kohlmeyer, you have the floor.
Part of my question earlier about kind of Supervisor Noble just restated, I think if we're talking about the 2015 budget or proposal, it would be my opinion this would take effect January 1, 2015, because I didn't want this to be aimed at any individual that, despite that we have had a hole in our process or in our wording this year. It's unfortunate. Decisions have been made, offers have been made. It shouldn't be punitive to that person, in my opinion. If offers have already been given, decisions have already been made, we should close the door and move forward, but it shouldn't be punitive on any person that's taken a job since in this year, in my opinion. So, but I think it should be decided tonight. I mean, we're talking about 2015. We could close the door now. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Rose.
Well, you're just kidding yourself if you don't think this is directed toward one person. It was, and it is. But we need to know up front, and Supervisor Noble's motion, when he seems to concede, well, he receives this, even though that he isn't going to be on the payroll until 2015, I believe, when he starts work. which I think bears on the issue as well, it has no monetary effect at all. It is aimed at one person. That's why he brought it up. And he has a right to do that. There's nothing wrong with that, to say, no, we did not mean to offer that to you when you were offered that position. And he can decide and review it. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. So there's no misunderstanding. Now, some people say when he takes the job, he gets it. And other people say he doesn't. I don't think that there was any wiggle room in this proposition. And I listened to what Mr. Noble said, and his argument was clear. There was no wiggle room. But whatever. I don't think it was the intention of the board to have any wiggle room. So let's be clear here. And the way to be clear is to send it back to committee so that it is all laid out and we don't have any kind of future disputes here or get involved in some future litigation because we weren't clear tonight, because you didn't want to bite the bullet. This is not something that somebody else is rushing to the personnel director's door to obtain, so, you know, we can wait till the next meeting.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
I don't believe Supervisor Noble is aiming this change or clarification to our policy specifically at this gentleman, but it just happens to be that this gentleman just happens to be the one person who got this. So to say some people are doing this because of his hire, it just, this one person gets offered this and we didn't even know it was available. When we voted to get rid of OPEB benefits, we voted to close the door. And now the administration is cracking it open, reading between the lines in our policy. That's the problem, is the administration is not reading what our intent was when we passed the stopping of the OPEB benefits. They cracked the window open, and we want to slam it shut so they know, don't try it again. That's what this is about, and unfortunately, it's based on one person, but that's because this is happening because of one person. So that's why I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody else wishing to speak on referring this back to committee? Roll call requested. So if you're in favor of sending it back to committee, vote yes. If you're not in favor of sending it back to committee, vote no. State your point, Supervisor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can this issue be resolved by the next meeting? Can this issue, can the committee convene, and can this issue be resolved by the next time this board convenes?
Supervisor Rose?
Yes, I'll call a meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I wanted to communicate to our fellow board members, that there'll be a meeting in between before we have our next meeting. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So everyone's clear?
Yes, 7, no, passes.
14. I hit the wrong button, so I apologize on that. Okay. Is there any more amendments? Is there any more amendments? We do have another amendment. Supervisor Poole, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sent to the county clerk, which was emailed earlier today, and also sent out to the supervisors, a motion to remove the Civic Center from the Public Works budget on page 90. That's Object 582-250 in the amount of $1,200,000. And my comment is, if the county needs space near the courthouse, we should rent until we know the long-term plan for the courthouse employees. We do not need to take properties off the tax rolls. It's time the taxpayers get some credit back on their tax bills for the sale of the Yule House, and also the money it was for the gates for the parking lot, as Supervisor Molinaro stated so eloquently in his last day. So my motion is to remove the Civic Center from the Public Works budget, page 90, Object 582-250, in the amount of $1,200,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Poole. Supervisor Alverman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We looked at this.
Oh, sorry about that, yeah. Yeah, second was Supervisor Skalitsky. I misspoke. I apologize. Sorry for interrupting you.
Okay. We looked at this long and hard, and the administration did. And I'm sure the Finance Committee, people have had their questions, but, what we've got to look at is the long history here of foresight. And, the first question you would have to ask is the county going to stop growing? I know we've talked about the high impact fund. Everybody's chattering about casinos and Amazon and Uline. Well, we know the county's not going to stop growing. We know the courthouse is going to be one of our problems. We are going to have some relocation if we add one court, and there's talk about adding 2 courts. When you look at a campus, we can't blow this area up and start a new campus. The courthouse is the courthouse. This is a historic building. We have a long history of the foresight, and I mentioned earlier the 3 county executives I've worked with. Everyone's had it. I'm just going to go and think about a list of things and properties. I mentioned to Supervisor Rose tonight the Kemper Center. We bought that for, I think it was $175,000. If you've been down there and seen the activities, the beauty, and look at the value of that property. I believe it's between $6 and $8 million. I'm not sure what it's insured for. The use that property gets for the public, the quality of life that all our parks do. We're not talking about a park. We're talking about the need for space. We're talking about the need for parking that this addresses. We're looking into the future. This building, I'm sure people thought, well, they really don't need that. They don't need that building. Last year, and Bernie Vosch came to us with these ideas. And Bernie does not throw money around. Bernie is a very conservative man. Bernie came to us with the house next to Brookside, which is going to enable us to expand Brookside. Bernie came to us with the house next to Petts Park, which squared off any ownership problems that we have with Petrifying Springs Park. The county center, people called that John Collins's Taj Mahal. They thought we did not need the county center. Now try to book a meeting in the county center. This is all looking ahead. The Katy Park that we've had for over 10 years, that was all purchased with grants, half matching money from the state of Wisconsin. The land next to the Katy Park, that 3 years ago, I went to the county executive with an idea on. With grants, with a $400,000 building that we did not have to build at Fox River Park, a $300,000 building that we did not have to build at the new park, on paper, the county made $382,000. This is looking ahead. Spending $1.2 million here, we're not talking about we're spending that $1.2 million this year. This is in the budget, acquisition, demolition, remodeling. This is needed. There is no other spot around this area at all that we can expand this. So, that was just a short list of things. This county has never been known for throwing money around. but spending it wisely. And I think this, when I first heard this idea, it wasn't that long ago, I thought, this is really sharp on Bernie's part. Again, foresight, maybe I've used it too many times, but we need to buy this property. We need to do the renovations. It'll be on the tax rolls for the next 2 years and through rental, but we'll add some parking right away. You can already see what's happened with the demolition of the building next to here. The additional parking we're going to have, we're in huge need of space here. So I would urge everyone, just with that short little bit of information I've given you, to really trust the Corporation Council, trust the administration on this, and we need to purchase those properties.
Thank you, Supervisor Alverman. Vice Chair Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those of you that have been around long enough to remember our Director of Planning and Development, George Melcher, you will remember that he was a great visionary for this county. He was the one who planned for the future of our residents and our future, our future children. Years ago, he set aside a lot of land. And I think you see it in the growth that we have today and what we are doing with our county. To not do this now is going to be a great disservice to our taxpayers, as it's going to cost them more in the long run if we have to wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bruning. Supervisor Boyd Frederick, you have the floor.
I agree with the statements that have already been made about that we need to do this. Right now, if we don't do it, it's penny wise and pound foolish. It's simple. It's available. It's near the campus. What's going to happen if we don't do this? Do we come back 10 years now when property values are double what they are now and say, oh, I guess now the taxpayer gets to pay more because we didn't have the foresight back right now to get these properties, look ahead and say, okay, we're going to need the courts. We're going to have expansion of the Clerk of Courts office. All of this will happen. It's better we do it now, where we could purchase the properties at a low value instead of waiting years from now when we have to do it and we're put up and say, this is now we have to do it, and we're in a rush, and now we can do it nice and slow, and it's going to be very good for the county in the long run.
Thank you. Supervisor Ron Frederick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little story about the 45 and 50 property. Supervisor Hollister, if anybody knows, Supervisor Hollister was from Bristol, and he was coming back one day and he said, you know what, there's a property on that corner that's for sale. We should buy that, he said, because, you know, we might want to do something out there someday. And I think we paid like $285,000 for that whole corner. When you get, and I'm, like I said, I've been around a while, when we built the jail, that was another problem. We didn't have enough money to buy all the property. If we would have bought all the property, we'd own everything all the way down to the Wendy's down there, but we didn't. We ran out of money. We did have enough money we bought the properties that were right across where the safety building house now is used to be 3 houses. We bought those properties, and then we had another $1.5 million that we bought the properties, but the church, and we didn't have enough money to buy the church. I wish we would have done it. I wish I could go back. If we don't buy these properties now, they're not going to, maybe they'll be for sale, maybe they won't, but we've got to do this. It doesn't make any sense to not expand. It's going to expand. It's going to happen. So we got to do it. I mean, this motion is ridiculous. I mean, I hate to say that. I don't mean it anything against the supervisor, but it's just not no foresight at all.
Thank you, Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Grady, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suppose much of what I'll say has been said by others and perhaps somewhat more eloquently than what I'll say, but when you look at it, you have to ask yourself the following question. Are we poised for more growth here in Kenosha County? And I think it's evident. You read the newspapers, you see what's happening with the interstate. Yes, we are. With that, you would have to assume there's a need for more efficient county operations. And instead of flinging the county operations here, there, and everywhere, we already have a downtown campus. To expand upon what we have is efficient. It's prudent. It's wise. We take a look at the current state of both the real estate market. Prices are just starting to rebound. It is a good time to purchase. And also, interest rates are at very near historical lows. Even for commercial paper, we're looking at low rates. So if we're to be considered responsible entities for public funds, if we're supposed to have some type of vision, some type of planning, the 3 points that I mentioned, growth, need, and financing, I don't think it's a very large leap of faith to take a look at the situation, invest wisely. We've done our due diligence, and I would encourage your support for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Esposito, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really think the issue right here is space. We don't have enough of it, and obviously this downtown campus isn't going anywhere. But I guess I have a question through the chair to the maker of the motion that wants to cut this out and said we should just rent. Can you elaborate on that for me? One of these, do we know these properties are available for rent? Have you done any due diligence on that? Or you're just saying that basically I want to cut this out of the budget and we'll just rent? Can you give me a little more clarification on that, please?
Sure. I think Supervisor Elman said it best, that we don't know what the courts are planning, so why don't we rent some facilities for these for the employees who need space right now until we have something on the table. And that is the reason to put this on hold until we know what the courts are actually planning.
Okay. But we don't even know if there is space for rent in this downtown campus, correct? You haven't researched that?
We could rent in that building, we could rent in any other building around the area.
But that's what you're saying, we can rent, correct? Okay. Thank you, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Sklitsky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I supported this motion because I did not support this program in committee. And it's not that I didn't support it because the maker didn't do a thorough job of analyzing it. I didn't support it because it was the first I had heard about this imperative need for additional space and that we must move right now. And if we don't, it'll just slip through our fingers. A number of supervisors have mentioned interest rates. They've been at historical lows for about 4 to 6 years right now, so I don't think they're going to jump up anytime soon. We talk about climbing property values. The days of double-digit property valuations are over. And I'm glad that they are, because we saw what it did to our economy because of that fallacy. I'm not necessarily opposed to this project long-term, but I sit on the Public Works Committee, and it just came literally out of the blue. And we talked about, well, we've got to be able to act fast. Yet, when on a previous motion, we talked about how we need to put it back in the committee so we can thoroughly analyze it. I looked at this project as it is half of the funding is made up by revenue or sales of properties that I was hopeful would be returned to the taxpayer. But rather than that, rather than give the taxpayer a break, rather than show them that perhaps we are an advocate for them and we're looking after their pocketbooks too, we're always so concerned about growing county government. It's got to grow, because we got to grow. We're growing just fine. There's plenty of space around if we need to on a temporary basis to utilize. Another supervisor mentioned, well, we've done the due diligence and analyzed the rent. I think we all can come away with the conclusion in the downtown area there are spaces available to rent. Will it be absolutely perfectly suitable to what the need is? No, but I don't think that these properties are necessarily either. There's literally been, other than a motion made earlier, no cut whatsoever to this budget. It's been presented to us as being so responsible and that we should just swallow it hook, line, and sinker. Well, this is a project here that I don't see as emergency. I think it's a good project. I think that we can take some time with it, and we don't need to add to the massive amount of capital bonding that we are planning for this budget, because there are service fees that are going to come along with it. And so I would urge the supervisors to reconsider and support this amendment to not kill this project, but let's just put it, or delay it, if you would, for next year's budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Sklitsky. Supervisor Hallman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will not be supporting the motion to remove this from the budget, but as I've heard from some of the discussion tonight, and I hate to do this to her, it seems we might need a tiny education lesson, and I see our Clerk of Courts is in the back of the house, so if she'd be so kind as to maybe enlighten us as to what some of the potential needs are for the immediate and long-term future, I think that might be wise.
You have the podium, Madam Clerk of Courts.
Kenosha County is growing. We have crime. We have civil cases in nature. The court system will need to grow. And we have other court users in the building right now, and footprints are available to expand for additional courtrooms, but we still need the staffing too. We have storage needs regarding exhibits. Retention periods have expanded recently to the course of 75 to 100 years, and exhibits can't be electronically stored. They're physical evidence. So we do have growing needs within the court system. I'm not prepared to elaborate more in that regard, but we truly are landlocked. We have users in the courthouse that will need to eventually leave as the state approves additional branches of court with our growing caseload.
Without going into detail, if I could, Mr. Chairman, through the chair to the Clerk of Courts, if possible, maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe some of the sensitivity issues you might have around space usage that might make renting or something else that's not quote-unquote designated yours.
Excuse me for 1 second. It's about the potential need for space in the downtown campus. I think it's very germane to what's being talked about this evening on this particular issue.
If there's sensitivity issues where, you know, renting a facility is not feasible and not wise, then we should have some idea about that.
There are multiple players within the court system. We have people who don't want to be involved in the court system, people in small claims actions with evictions, people in car accidents, victims of crime, who then have to take their cases to civil court too. There are statutory requirements that mandate us to have space for victims in criminal actions pending the resolution of their cases. We recently addressed that a couple years ago by adding that space into the courthouse to house those through the district attorney's office within the courthouse. To send court users to another facility that is not directly related to our courthouse in the immediate near vicinity is going to hamper collections if they have to go someplace else to pay a fine. Right now, they're in the same building. They don't have to worry about going outside into the elements. There's those aspects. Management is also an issue. How do you manage people outside of your one building? It's easier to manage within one building. I can have one of our 3 managers within the courthouse on site all the time. Employees off site would be less managed. Perhaps that would become an issue with inefficient proceedings.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question?
Yes, it does. The only thing I can say is, with respect to the judicial system, as all the complexities that might imply, it's wise to leave this in the budget and not mess with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Supervisor Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think it's extremely narrow-minded to not look at the vision of moving forward in the embetterment of Kenosha County, and that just hold off and wait approach is basically going to cost more in the long run. But I've had some supervisors say they really didn't hear about this, that we were so crunched for space. I guess we talk about budget hearing meetings and so on and so forth. This was brought up at my judiciary and law budget meeting, and there was only one supervisor that was there. So, you know, we really got to go to these meetings so we get the full perspective of what's going on, so we don't see on the county board floor, well, I didn't know that we were so crunched for space. Judge Wagner and the Clerk of Courts, we discussed this at length at our budgetary meeting for the Judiciary and Law Committee. So obviously it wasn't probably discussed in length at the Finance Committee, but this is an issue, and we need to be diligent on doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Esposito. Supervisor Gable, you have the floor.
I call the vote.
Vote has been called. Is there a second? Second. There's been a second, okay. So now we'll have to vote whether to call the vote, and we have to have a roll call. We have to have a roll call on that, so if you're willing to call the vote, vote yes. If you're against calling the vote, vote no.
Your second.
Vote. And the motion on the floor, which was made by Supervisor Poole, is to remove the Civic Center from Public Works budget in the amount of $1,200,000, which was seconded by Supervisor Skalitsky. So if you're in favor of taking that out of the budget, vote yes. If you want to remove it, vote no. I'm sorry, yeah. Yeah, I misspoke on it. Yes, if you're in agreement to take it out, vote yes. And no, if you want to leave the money in. All right, any more lights? We do have a light here. Supervisor Arrington.
Thank you,
what's
Mr.
your
Chairman.
motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been discussion thus far this evening about the proposed budget and the preparation of that budget. I don't know whether or not this is an appropriate time to thank each and every supervisor, thank each and every entity that was involved in preparing this budget. At times, and this is not a slam or a personal attack against anybody, but I believe that.
Are you making a motion
No,
on
sir.
the budget? That's what we're discussing right now.
I'm out of order.
Okay. Supervisor Ritzloff, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion. I did send this to the county clerk. I don't know if she has it, but a motion on the page 3091 of our budget, line item 449500, employee health premium. I'd like to have that number changed from 15.5 million to 15, from the 15.7 to 15.5. This is a reduction of $240,000. And to support this, I'm recommending and asking that the employees that are in our health insurance plan, that are in the platinum, gold, and silver plan, contribution levels be doubled from 2% for the platinum, or for 1% for the platinum to 2%, 2% the gold to 4%, and silver 3 to 6%. If you look at the amount of money that is, it's for someone in the platinum plan, it's $15 a month if you're single. I don't see that as a lot of money. It's a savings of $240,000 to us. I think, Mr. Chairman, that it's important that we consider the fact that our taxpayers are paying a lot of money and our employees have a tremendous health plan. That's fine, but I think we need to start moving in the direction of realigning our health insurance. So that's my motion I'm making.
Is there a second on that?
Okay.
Second by Supervisor Poole. Are you done with your
I'm done.
discussion on that? Supervisor Elverman, you have the floor.
Well, I pushed it to make a different motion, but I'll speak on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I
feel like Supervisor Noble.
I'll speak on this one. I know that at this point, the Personnel Department is beginning a new study on retention, on our, everything to do with personnel. Retention, hiring, benefits, payroll packages, the whole works, to see what we're doing right, to see what we're doing wrong. And I believe that's the time for this discussion on benefits, on the health care package. I like to see the whole thing put together. And this seems like just a quick little cut that may not make any sense in the whole realm of things. So I wouldn't go for this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor Elverman. Supervisor Grady, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to our Mr. Geertsen, please. Have you had a chance to review the proposal here, and does the dollar amount make sense, and is that, from your perspective, legitimate?
Yes.
Okay. The second question I have then would be probably answered by Mr. Riedel. In terms of what each employee would have to contribute additionally to the proposed increase, if it were to occur, are the dollar amounts in line with your expectations in your version of what the proposal
I'm sorry,
is?
is Supervisor Retzlaff's proposal
Yes, correct.
consistent?
Yes.
With what I believe they would be paying?
Yes.
Yes.
That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Ron Frederick, you have the floor.
When does it stop? Our employees haven't had a raise in 4 years except 25 cents that they received last year. This year, we're proposing a 1.5% increase in maybe July, unless the study comes in and the study uses up more than the $500,000 we put in the budget, and then it may not take effect until August or September or October. The employees have given up, they pay their own pension now, by the way, we all know that, okay? They've taken a pay cut for the last 4 years on all of the stuff that Act 10 did. And now we want to hit them again by increasing their copay for the premium. And if you look at the page, I've got it on here, they're now paying, if you go for an office visit, you're a county employee, you have to pay $35. If you go to the emergency room, it's $100. Diagnostic services is additional $35. That's the copay, okay? Besides the premium increases that they have to pay. Outpatients, $150. Inpatient hospitalizations, $300. Ambulances, $100. They've got a drug plan, but there's copays, there's deductibles, we talk about 10%, the 10% at the top one is paying the blue. But if you look at the whole plan, they're probably paying closer to 25 or 30% when you come with the copays and deductibles, and then they have if they go out of the network, of course, then there's a $600 deductible, 3 in a family. The list goes on. How much more are we going to be? Do we want to keep our employees? We've got a two-tier pay system at Highway. I asked the Highway Department, I said, are you losing people? He said yes. We've got some making $16, and some of the under the old ones are still making 23 or 24. They're working side by side doing the same thing. You heard the Brookside employees here last night. They were begging you because they're making like $11 an hour, $12 an hour. They're not making this. We've got department heads that make a lot of money, okay, but that's beside the point. We can't keep hitting our employees with these increases and expect to keep our people. We've got a lot of expansion going on. We've got all of the CABA thing came up tonight, all of the expansion, all of the new employers, I keep forgetting the name, but anyway, they're hiring 1,000 people out here but anyway, the point I'm making is that I think we've beat them up enough, okay? I think they have paid their dues. They're making less money than they were 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and now we want to hit them again. I think it's just wrong, and I hope supervisors will not vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Rolls, you have the floor.
Thank you. I requested the Personnel Department to determine what a employee contribution would be if the employee's salary was $50,360 currently under the new procedure here. The increased contribution to the retirement fund and our health insurance benefit totaled $9,751 out of a salary of $50,360. Out of that $9,751, the contribution for the family insurance coverage was $6,327. So that's a very substantial contribution. This would add probably, according to Mr. Gersten in a conversation with myself before the meeting, at least $750 additional dollars. How much do you want to, how unattractive do you want to make the job, and how punitive do you want to be in addition to the almost $10,000 contribution to date? I urge your rejection of this proposal.
Thank you, Supervisor Rolls. Supervisor Scalise, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question was asked, when does it stop? You're right. When do we stop raising taxes every year on taxpayers? There's a perception that this is an attack on county employees, and it's not. If you think it's all rosy out there in the private sector, you're mistaken. It's not. Many taxpayers haven't seen a raise in years, and they're paying substantially higher, or maybe they can't even afford any, or maybe perhaps some is not even offered through their employers with regards to health insurance. The differentiation of the plan that's offered currently and the share or the premium portion of what employees, as one of the other supervisors has pointed out, this is a top 1% plan. This is a very minor adjustment. There's been talk about waiting for the compensation package analysis, which we've been waiting for up to about a year now, I believe. And yet it's still not completed. We're going to wait another 6 months. This is not an attack upon county employees. This is allowing, because I heard it earlier tonight, an adjustment in fairness between the taxpayers that are paying the salaries of county employees and what they're experiencing and what county employees are experiencing. I'm not saying that none of them are struggling. I understand that part, and I feel for them, because I've had to go through struggles myself. And then I've had to make hard decisions of what do I give up? What do I not go with? What can I afford? What do I need versus what do I want? And there's a difference there. So in this case, I support this proposal because it's a reasonable adjustment. It's a very small amount. And it says to the taxpayers who were elected by to represent that, you know what, we feel your pain too, and we recognize that it would really be nice that if you got a break some year on your taxes. So you're right, when does it stop? From what I'm seeing on this board, it's not stopping this year. And if it's so bad, and it was so terrible, the benefits and compensation package that the Kenosha County is offering, then I would expect to see a lot more job postings being put up, but I don't see those. I see a few, which is just about normal attrition. I support this resolution. I would encourage other supervisors to take a look at it and say, you know what, are you representing your taxpayers and your constituents effectively? And some of which are county employees, no doubt about it. We all have them living in our districts. But a tax break to them is also money put back in their pocket so they can use it at their discretion for the things that they value or they need or they maybe perhaps want. So I encourage other supervisors to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Sklitsky. Supervisor Colmeyer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to point out one thing. We did discuss this at the Finance and Administration Budget Hearing Committee. I'm in support of this amendment, and I think it's an equitable adjustment. If you look at what's in the 2015 budget already, if you're an employee at the blue or the bronze level, your rates are already being doubled. And those it equates to about 50% of the employees. So in the budget currently, 50% of the employees will see their rates doubled, and 50% won't, depending on what level you're at. So the amendment brings everyone in the same line. So I think it's an equitable adjustment that we're moving everyone their rates at the same point. We keep the integrity of the scale the same. So I like that. And the second thing is I mean, nobody wants to see rates raised. I don't want to see rates raised on employees, but I mean, we all face this. It's economic reality. Rates are raising every year. I just got mine today. Mine increased a ton. I mean, I think a lot of us would love to pay these rates, and I'm not trying to pit one group against the other, but it's just the economic reality out there that it's just a fact of economics. So that is all.
Thank you, Supervisor Colmeyer. Supervisor Arrington, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Briefly, first and foremost, and it was mentioned, a majority of what I was going to say, mentioned already by Supervisor Ron Frederick. I'm in agreement also with Supervisor Skalinski when he says that the Kenosha County employees are taxpayers also. With that said, I'm not going to support this. They've given enough. It seems like that they've been up here for something throughout the entire year and last year. And the thing that I don't like about it, and you love it or hate it, the thing I don't like about the whole thing that's gone down in here tonight, this nitpick, I said it, this nitpicking of the budget when we've already got the number where we're at on this budget and we're going to nitpick it to death in front of these people is pathetic. I'm be honest with you. We're all taxpayers. We keep on referencing back to the taxpayers, but all these people sitting behind us are taxpayers. And the thing is that we're reaching for these things that you know have no merit just so that we can say that we cut something. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I'm not going to support that. And I'm not going to support anything else that nitpicks this budget, because what the message that needs to go out of here is that it takes money and sacrifice to run a county, okay? We need to stop this fairy tale. The fact of the matter is that it takes money to run Kenosha County. And I have constituents that I know support me. I won't make a bad decision for them. Every decision that we make, when they pay, I pay, we pay. So we need to get out of that frame of mind to here tonight, because we're all taxpayers in Kenosha County, and we've all given up something in here. And I'm not going to ask them for any more money off of what we've already taken away from them. That's ridiculous. I'm done.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Noble, you have the floor.
Me? Oh.
You're noble. Yeah, that'd be
I didn't hear you. You woke me up.
Sorry I disturbed your nap.
You know what? I was on board with this. I was probably one of the leaders of the pack to get employees to start contributing, but I don't really think this is the time to do it, because to do anything different than what's proposed. They already proposed an increase on the two bottom levels to try to drive people into the higher levels where they contribute less, into the wellness program. I'm struggling right now trying to present something for the people that I work with and for the insurance for myself, trying to come up with something reasonable, not, that they can afford, I can afford. It's a difficult thing, but The employees really, over the last few years, really have taken a hit in a lot of different areas, including health insurance. I mean, they weren't, not that long ago, they weren't contributing. We used to contribute $400 to their flex spending account. Now they don't, you know, if they want to get a flex spending account, they've got to put their own money in it. They used to have dental. Now that they want dental, they got to pay for it. The vision is the same thing. I think these are, what you see is for what they get for the strict health insurance probably is pretty good benefits, but they lost dental, they lost vision. And then we were talking about that OPED liability too. Every employee who started now after 2003, that was a huge benefit for them, and they don't get that anymore either. So I think they've taken a lot of hit. I think I'm willing to wait one more year, less than a year, to find out what that study that they're talking about that's already been funded is going to say, and, you know, and I can wait for one more budget to find out what the results of that are. So I'm not supporting the motion, the amendment. That's all.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. As you were. Supervisor Anita Johnson. Just kidding. Starting to get a little stale in here, so I'll move it up a little bit. You have the floor. I'm sorry.
This is a very difficult motion before us, amendment before us. It is too high. I mean, 2.4 is too high, and there are so many things here to consider. But most of all, and I've been saying this for the past year, I'm greatly concerned at how we're going to retain talent here in the county. And nothing is more expensive for a business than a high turnover rate and head count. It causes an extreme lack of production. I mean, you're extremely inefficient when there is a high turnover rate. We can't compete if we keep doing this to our employees. You know, and the thing is, I honestly think the only reason we do so well as a county is because we have such a great pool of employees. I personally don't understand how they stay. You know, but thank God they do. And I just, you know, I came in and I've been debating this and I was gonna vote for it, but you know what, I can't. I can't support it. And for, you know, but as an alternative, if you look at page 118 and 120, there are donations we're giving to Kemper Center, Historical Society, and Pringle Natures. Not maintenance fees, donations that total over $253,000. Each of those places should be able to bring in their own money to support themselves. I would say, take those off. Leave these guys alone.
Is that it?
Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Anita Johnson. Supervisor Gable, you have the floor.
Call the question.
Question's been called and seconded by Supervisor Arrington. To call the question, vote yes if you're in favor of calling the question, no if you're against calling the question. State your question, Supervisor Colmar.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Got it. Fine.
Good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, before you is the motion to eliminate the levy.
No, to increase.
Which one? That was on the amendment.
No, that was to call the question.
Oh,
Now we're on the amendment.
now we're on the amendment, you're right. I'm sorry. Okay.
Now we're on the
Supervisor Ritzloff's amendment now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna just start stating. Okay. Now we're on the amendment, okay, from Supervisor Ritzloff, which was seconded by Supervisor Poole, to take the additional $240,000 to reduce the 2015 levy, $15,534,182 to $15,774,182. And to support this, would change the following contribution adjustment levels as follows: silver 6%, gold 4%, platinum 2%. And if you're in favor of this amendment, vote yes. If you're against this amendment, vote no. I'm abstaining. You have the floor.
I move the previous question.
Second.
The previous question has been moved by Supervisor Alverman and seconded by Supervisor Rose. If you're in favor of calling the question, vote yes. If you're against calling the question, vote no. Close the debate. Sorry, I missed that part. It's getting late.
On the budget.
Close
Close the debate on the budget.
Close debate on the budget. The entire budget.
I'm moving the motion, yes.
Is everybody clear?
Point of order, I'm not clear. There's no other amendments, so he's just making a motion. We don't have to close the, debate or anything. There's no other amendments before us, so he's just moving the budget.
I'm moving the previous question, which is the budget.
Right, so we're not closing any debate. There's nothing else before us. Correct?
You don't know that.
until we close debate.
Trying to close debate.
We didn't specify it, but I meant
And it's not debatable.
Did they get that right or not? Is that right now or not? What he just said?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no other amendments.
So what are we voting on?
Close Yes, is 15. What are we saying no? Excuse me, wait. No, wait a minute. It's got to be 2/3. Corporation Council's right. It didn't close out yet. It's not 2/3. You need 18. Okay. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask for a revote on this particular item. Okay? Does the maker of the motion proceed with your motion and the second to put this back on so everyone votes? I think there was some confusion on what we were all voting on. So, yes to close debate, no to keep debate open. Thank you. Supervisor Hall?
There's a point of information, Mr. Chairman. I was under the impression that we were at some point addressing the potential payroll change, extension, whatever it is that we're calling that, that Madam Vice Chair addressed at our last meeting. Is this the time where we would do that, or do we not need to act on that? How are we handling that?
Vice Chair, you want to answer that?
The items that I mentioned last night are just a procedure that is being written into the policy for those dates of when it will go into effect. But the payroll system that they are going to put into effect is part of the entire budget, and that is already in the budget book. So we don't need to act on anything tonight.
Thank you.
Unless you want to change anything, but don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that clear? Supervisor Noble?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not have a motion, but I do have a question for Dave Gersten. We had a citizen that spoke last night during the public hearing, and he seemed to be done some significant research with regards to our debt policy, the life of the debt and the life of the assets financed by the debt. I do see we have a memo on our desk, but for the benefit of the citizen who took the trouble to come to our public hearing, would you kind of summarize this?
Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I can? Thank you. Thank you. The question had to do with the debt policy, and there's language in the debt policy that says the county will, when it issues the debt, the life of the assets will not exceed the life of the debt. And so there was a question raised about that during the public hearing last night. And we previously had that question during prior to the budget. There was a good question that was raised by one county board supervisor. So we had already analyzed that and already answered it. And it showed that, and we analyzed 2014. 2014, there's we're issuing 10-year notes. The useful life is 14 to 15 years. And then after yesterday, we reanalyzed 2015, and they're 10-year notes. The useful life of the assets are over 15 years. Now, I would say that that analysis is conservative. So, for example, we're using a 10-year useful life for the ERP, and the current ERP is 20 years old. So it's most likely that the useful life of the assets that we're financing in this budget will go beyond 15 years. So we are in compliance with the debt policy.
So basically, you're consolidating the all the assets and then coming up with an average of the assets, so that if you have an asset that's 3 years, like police vehicles, you're averaging them out with something that might have a 20-year, and you're coming up with an average which meets the debt policy, correct?
Not entirely. It is correct that one element of the response is the weighted average, and we use the weighted average part to respond to the question from last night. But the earlier question we got prior to budget hearing, we looked at the other part. And so in order to respond to that, I'm going to have to go through that. Oh, if that's okay. So when we amortize our debt, we pay principal during the 10 years. So we don't always structure it so we pay principal every year, but we do pay principal, and we don't have a balloon payment where all of that principal gets paid in year 10. So our analysis that we delivered as part of the budget inquiry, and it's a document that we delivered to you, showed that the principal, enough principal gets paid off ahead of the shorter lived assets, so those are also paid off before the life of those assets expire. So it's really a two-part answer to that question.
Okay.
Every way we look at it, whether it's a weighted average or whether you look at it as specific identification, in both instances, the debt policy is complied with.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
I just want to follow up since Supervisor Noble brought it up. So what you're saying, Mr. Geertsen, is that, for example, I'm looking at your outlay plan you have here. The law enforcement vehicles, the sheriff vehicles, we know that usually, or they last 3 years. So, and in your line item, you have them that they cost $488,855. So in a 10-year bond, we pay at least $488,855 in principal in the first three years?
Yes, yes.
Okay, same with like the first 5 years for the IT?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. All right, seeing no other lights, we're going to be voting on Policy 2 resolution from Finance Administration Committee regarding the 2015 county budget as amended. Vote yes if you're in favor, or no if you're against it.
Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Gentz, yes. Brunig, yes. Dodge, yes.
Supervisor Rose?
I would move the ordinance.
Ordinance 25 has been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor O'Day. Supervisor Rose.
This repeal is consistent with the budget resolution that you just passed, which does provide that the county treasurer, with the assistance of the county finance director and staff, would assist in the investment of funds. I think this brings some needed assistance to the county treasurer, as well as professional advice from our own finance administration department.
Thank you. Seeing no lights. Roll call has been requested. Vote yes if you're in favor, and no if you're against.
My second.
You already got the second, it's all there.
'64 from Finance Administration, Public Works Facilities, Human Service Committees, and Brookside Trustees regarding an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $18,550,000 general obligation bonds or notes for Brookside Care Center improvements. Alverman, yes. Grady, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Galitsky, yes. Poole, yes. Pitts, yes. Highland, yes. Kessler, yes. Johnson, yes. O'Day, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes. Johnson, yes. Anita Johnson. Arrington, yes. Blau, yes. Decker, yes. Retzloff, yes. Finance, Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Brunig, yes. Gentz, yes. Dodge, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
I move the resolution.
Resolution 64 has been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Alverman. Supervisor Rose.
I believe this project has been amply discussed, and the need has been demonstrated, and the profitability of Brookside is something that needs to be endorsed.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Ritzloff, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Rose is right. This, especially from my concern, has been analyzed to death. I have. And I think initially when we talked about this was presented to you, I brought up my concerns about Medicare. And I still do have those concerns, but when I was impressed with the Brookside people they analyzed that to the best of their ability. They realize that the Medicare problem or potential in the future does exist, but I agree that we should go ahead with this because we can't just live in fear of what our federal government, I guess, is going to do on this. So I think some of the people here saw me acting like I wasn't for this initially when it was presented to us, but I am for it, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Ritzloff. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
I agree with Supervisor Retzloff, and I brought up this point after the meeting because what surprised me at the Human Services meeting was at the presentation, I had no idea that this was going to be $18,550,000. That was just a huge shock from a presentation we received, I believe 3 years ago, where it was nowhere near that amount, and then it just getting dropped on our lap that it was this large of amount. That just really surprised me, and communication would be nice, just like with the purchase of the building next door. Communication to the committees instead of it being dropped on your lap like that is something that would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Seeing no other lights,
Roll call.
roll call's been requested. Vote yes if you're in favor of Resolution 64. Vote no if you're against.
Authorizing the issuance of not to exceed, excuse me, $7,630,000 general obligation promissory notes for budgeted capital projects, including road and highway improvements and grants. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Kohlmeyer, yes. Brunig, yes. Gens, yes. Dodge, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
Move the resolution.
Resolution 65 has been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Vice Chair Bruning. Supervisor Rose.
This resolution endorses and finances the capital projects, including road and highway improvements and grants, as set forth in the budget you just passed.
Thank you. Seeing no lights on this particular issue, roll call has been requested. Vote yes if you're in favor of Resolution 65, no if you're against.
Regarding an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,040,000 general obligation promissory notes for grants to the Kenosha Area Business Alliance. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Kohlmeyer, yes. Brunig, yes. Gens, yes. Dodge, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
I would move the resolution.
Resolution 66 has been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Supervisor Rose.
This resolution endorses and makes available the funds, if necessary, for Kenosha Area Business Alliance. We've previously discussed this at this meeting as well as others. We urge your endorsement of the proposal.
Okay, seeing no lights, roll call has been requested. Vote yes if you're in favor of Resolution 66 or no if you're against. To adjourn by Supervisor Ron Frederick, seconded by Supervisor Arrington. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed. Thank you.